You're listening to the Telltale Channel. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check out my Patreon. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. People have been calling the Christian nationalist movement Al-Qaeda for years. But how accurate is that? How similar is Al-Qaeda to the Christian nationalist movement? When you look past the jokes and do the comparisons seriously with actual sources, it stops being funny. When you think of Al-Qaeda, you probably think of caves, Kalashnikovs, and grainy video statements. You probably don't think of a healthcare plan. Members got $1,000 a month, a round-trip plane ticket home once a year, and a month of vacation. Married members got $1,500 a month. If you wanted out, you get $2,400 as severance. They filled out forms in triplicate to get tires. This is not a cave operation. It was a bureaucracy with a theological mission statement. And when you strip away the violence and look at the structure underneath, the model that actually made Al-Qaeda work, you find that same model operating inside the United States right now. Built by American citizens, operating legally, with tax-exempt status. Let's get into it. The caves and the Kalashnikovs are real, but that's not what made Al-Qaeda dangerous. Lawrence Wright won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Looming Tower. He spent 5 years researching Al-Qaeda and did over 500 interviews. What he found was an organization that looked a lot more like a nonprofit than a militia. Bin Laden ran a holding company in Sudan called Wadi el-Aqiq. He had a construction firm, an agricultural company with a near monopoly on Sudan's sesame and corn exports, tannery, and a truck import business under that umbrella. He had 1 million acres of farmland. One parcel was, quote, larger than Bahrain. Al-Qaeda had a constitution. It had bylaws. It had committees for military affairs, politics, information, administration, security, and surveillance. The leader was required to have at least 7 years of jihad experience, preferably a college degree. There were monthly council meetings and an annual plan of action. Al-Qaeda ran on 6 layers of infrastructure: theological authority, an educational pipeline, media, money, a political vision, and violence. The violence is the layer everyone remembers. It was also the least effective layer. The 9/11 attacks forced a response that tore the whole thing apart. The caliphate they wanted to set up never happened. It was set up later by ISIS, another group, but Al-Qaeda never got a chance. Everything that actually worked, recruitment, financing, ideological justification, had nothing to do with the bombs. So that's the model, 6 layers. Let's walk through each one and talk about where it's operating domestically. Not as a metaphor, as a direct structural comparison with sources. Al-Qaeda needed religious permission. Bin Laden wasn't a cleric. He was basically a construction executive. So he needed somebody to say God was on board. That job went to a man named Abu Hajar al-Iraqi. Abu Hajar was an electrical engineer who'd memorized the Quran, not a theologian. He dug up a 13th century scholar named Ibn Taymiyyah, pulled a ruling about the Mongol invasions, and stretched it to cover anyone who happened to be standing near an American soldier. If they're a good Muslim, they go to paradise. If they're bad, they go to hell. Either way, you can kill them and let God sort it out. Wright identifies that moment, a Thursday evening lecture in Khartoum, people sitting on carpets drinking mango juice, as the turning point. That's when Al-Qaeda went from a mujahideen army to a terrorist organization. One engineer's fatwa. Lance Wallnau fills the same slot in the Christian nationalist movement. Wallnau is a former pastor from Rhode Island. His doctorate is from a diploma mill. Around the year 2000, he says he heard a missionary tell a story about 7 areas of cultural influence: government, education, media, business, family, arts, and religion. He mashed that together with somebody's near-death experience about 7 mountains rising out of the ocean, and he came up with the 7-mountain mandate. The idea that God wants Christians to take control of the top of each mountain. Not participate, not influence, control, top down. His words: if you can capture the high places, you can shape a culture.
3% of the population, roughly 3 to 4% of the population, are radical leftist elites. 30% of the population are evangelical born-again Christians that are inclined to go towards Pentecostal language. I mean, we're really out there. 30% against 3%, but they neutralized the church because they're also in religion. They changed the definition of marriage, so they've taken over family. They've totally taken over academia, so the education institutions are teaching leftist theology or leftist ideology and silencing conservatives. They're controlling government right now. They've taken over legacy media, Hollywood, entertainment, and arts, and now they've got Wall Street. This is 3%. 30% of the population is Christian. How is it that 30% are dominated by 3%? They have a worldview for bringing their kingdom here now. We're told to pray thy kingdom come, but we put it off to the second coming.
There it is.
We put it off. They are organized and we are not. So God says, I'm going to send you a revival. And we're praying for revival. And as we pray for revival, we think, well, watch what happens. That 30 will become 50%. It doesn't matter, because the guards in the prison control what goes on with the inmates. You could have 75%. And if they control those high places, you still are in suppression, because that's the story of history. So it's not just in having more. We certainly want souls. In eternity, that's the most important thing. And this is, Mario, where a lot of people get confused. Isn't the kingdom more important? Isn't Jesus more important? Isn't souls more important? Of course, this isn't either or. It's both and. We want souls and we want nations. Jesus was promised nations for his inheritance, not just churches.
Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too. Fascinatingly, this is actually from a World War II era anti-Semitic document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Nazis used to say this was the Jews' plan for world domination. I'm not sure who pulled it from the anti-Semitic document, but somebody did. Was it Walna? C. Peter Wagner, the intellectual godfather of the New Apostolic Reformation, heard Walna speak, and he was hooked. Wagner pushed it through his networks of tens of thousands of churches. He called it the most radical and potentially world-changing paradigm shift of all. A 2023 survey found that over 20% of Americans now agree God wants Christians to stand on top of those 7 mountains. 2/3 of people who believe in modern prophecy agree. That's millions of people organizing their politics around a concept one person assembled from a supposed missionary story, but probably an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory 25 years ago. Let's compare them. Abu Hajar was an engineer who gave himself theological authority and used it to justify mass murder. Walna is a pastor with a mail-order doctorate who gave himself prophetic authority and used it to build a political ideology that millions of people view as divine mandate. Self-appointed authority providing divine cover for a political project. Walna also told Trump to his face that he was a modern-day Cyrus, the pagan king from Isaiah 45, who God anointed to deliver Israel. Trump is the 45th president. Isaiah chapter 45. The theological problem of supporting somebody who can't name a Bible verse was solved overnight. His paganism became proof of the prophecy. This is Johnny Enlow, another Trump prophet.
President Trump is still the Cyrus, and he still has unfinished business. And we've gone in depth on that before. And he still has the Isaiah 45 assignment to take down Babylon, which for our purposes represents the deep state. It is much more embedded in a much wider root system than we possibly imagined, maybe. And so the timetable is driven by God. You know, there's an aspect of people ask why we don't know that the prophetic doesn't get those things. There's a whole lot of things that the Lord is not revealing. It's not just because they're bad prophets. You can't say things you don't see. And the more you understand what's going on, it would literally mess up strategy of how the Lord is doing it. You know, if he's using certain individuals in the world and certain leadership and certain militaries to do things, and we're telling all the secrets and timing, right. It really, you know, we have heard that actually from, we'll say from the other side, even witches and warlocks are telling, we'll say deep staters, they're not hearing anything. And so they are told to listen in on the prophetics, on the prophetic channels, on the prophets, to hear what's going on. So the Lord's not going to give them anything that helps them know what to do, how to fight, how to stay in there long.
And here's Donald Trump being completely incapable of naming even a favorite section of the Bible when given two choices.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that
you
like?
No, I don't want to do that. I mean,
Old Testament guy or New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
And here's Donald Trump making up a fake Bible verse like nobody would check.
The Bible. You talked about the Art of the Deal, great book. The Bible, even better. Why is that for you?
There's so many things. Like, you know, you take whatever you want to say. There's so many things that you could learn from it. Proverbs, the chapter, never bend to envy. I've had that thing all of my life where people are bending to envy. And they're just, it's an incredible book. So many things you can learn from the Bible, and you can lead your life. And I'm not just talking in terms of religion. I'm talking in terms of leading a life, even beyond a religion. There's so many brilliant things in the Bible.
I just created a new website, firesidewatch.com. You can watch videos with friends, and everybody can play or pause the video. I made it so I could collaborate with other YouTubers, but I figured I might as well make it available to everybody. On top of that, you can add videos to the queue, upvote them, and sort by most upvoted. Give it a look, firesidewatch.com. And while you're at it, check out my Patreon, owenmorgan.com/Patreon. You can follow me there for free. Again, that is fake, and it's obviously his biggest vice anyway. Al-Qaeda's most selective training camp was called Farouk. Wright describes it as isolated from the other camps so recruits could be watched. The men picked were young, committed, and obedient. They filled out applications, signed loyalty oaths, swore secrecy. The point was mass recruitment. It was building a future leader base. The Federalist Society is the most effective leader-building operation in American political history. ProPublica did a deep investigation into Leonard Leo, the man who built the Federalist Society into what it is today. What they found was a 40-year pipeline. Leo's strategy was to find ideologically committed law students young, mentor them through clerkships, advance them to judgeships, and insulate them from what he called ideological drift. But they had a problem. In 1992, 3 Republican-appointed justices upheld abortion rights in Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Leo figured they hadn't picked wrong, they just hadn't controlled the pipeline tightly enough. So he built one. Leo drew up the short list of potential justices for Trump's campaign. He advised on Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. He helped pick or confirm Thomas, Roberts, and Alito, 6 of 9 Supreme Court justices, connected to one network. But it goes past the Supreme Court. Leo placed people in clerkships, lower court judgeships, White House jobs, and state attorney general offices. He personally called state AGs to recommend hires. In states that elect judges, his group spent millions on campaigns. Between 2014 and 2020, groups in Leo's orbit raised over $600 million. Then in 2021, one donor handed him a $1.6 billion trust, the largest known political advocacy donation in American history. A legal historian at the University of Michigan told ProPublica he couldn't think of anyone comparable in the history of American law. Al-Qaeda's Farouk camp trained leaders and foot soldiers. The Federalist Society trained judges. Al-Qaeda ran its money through charities, religious institutions, and business fronts. After 9/11, the United States spent billions shutting those pipelines down. The Christian nationalist movement runs money through the same channels: churches, PACs, dark money nonprofits, tax-exempt organizations, and every dollar of it is legal. Leo created a group called the Judicial Confirmation Network, tax-exempt, No donor disclosure. It ran ads for Supreme Court nominees and fed talking points to reporters. Officially independent from the Federalist Society and the White House. The Johnson Amendment is supposed to stop tax-exempt churches from doing politics. It's not enforced. Churches run voter registration drives, host campaign rallies, and endorse candidates while paying zero taxes. Catherine Stewart lays this out in her book Money, Lies, and God. She tracked the donor networks, the think tank funding, and the dark money flows. Her conclusion was that, quote, it takes time, organizational energy, and above all, money to weaponize grievances and hurl them against an established democracy. And this movement has it all, unquote. Al-Qaeda's entire financial operation across every country it touched never came close to $1.6 billion, as a Federalist Society has sitting in a single trust controlled by a single person. It was closer to $30 million per year for Al-Qaeda. It takes 11 days to count to 1 million. It takes 31 years to count to 1 billion. The amount of money Leo is pouring into the political system to control it is staggering. The problem doesn't go away until that funding network does. Al-Qaeda wanted to replace secular government with religious laws. That was the caliphate. A constitution, bylaws, committees, the whole thing. They failed. Their infrastructure got dismantled after 9/11. The caliphate never happened. The Christian nationalist movement wants to replace secular government with religiously derived law, and it's working. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is 900 pages. Staffing lists, executive orders, policy plans for every federal agency. It's not a manifesto, it's a transition manual. Trump completed 52% of the policy goals listed in Project 2025 in his first year. The Seven Mountain Mandate gives millions of Christians a framework for thinking about this in theological terms. Take the government mountain and take the education mountain. Alliance Defending Freedom runs strategic lawsuits designed to reshape First Amendment law case by case. State legislatures are passing abortion bans, book bans, religious display laws, and anti-trans legislation. Al-Qaeda had no legal path to power. Violence was the only option. The Christian nationalist movement has courts, legislatures, and a 900-page playbook. They don't need violence. They're getting what they want through their institutional capture. That's not a weakness in the comparison. That's the point.
I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Matthew Taylor wrote The Violent Take It by Force about the New Apostolic Reformation's role in January 6th. He tracked over 50 charismatic Christian leaders to Washington that day. The Smithsonian's curator of American religious history said religion wasn't a piece of the January 6th story, it was the story. Christian flags, crosses, group prayer, and Bible verses. Central to the whole thing. And none of the theological leaders Taylor identified have faced prosecution or scrutiny. They've only become more influential. Taylor uses an iceberg comparison. The people who commit violence are the tip. Underneath is the infrastructure, the rhetoric, the demonization, the apocalyptic framing, the theology that makes the violence feel necessary. The infrastructure doesn't give the order. It creates the conditions where someone decides to act on their own. That's exactly how Al-Qaeda worked in its later years. Bin Laden couldn't micromanage operations from his bunker after 9/11. He didn't need to. The ideological ecosystem produced people who were ready to act. The leadership built the theology. Individuals drew the conclusions and carried it out. January 6th was that dynamic playing out domestically. Christian nationalism's version of the lone wolf. The historian Ian Kershaw has a concept for how this works. He calls it working toward the Führer. In Nazi Germany, Hitler didn't need to give direct orders for most of the regime's worst actions. People anticipated what he wanted and acted on their own. Doctors volunteered patients for euthanasia programs. Lawyers dismantled legal protections. Regular citizens reported their neighbors to the Gestapo. Nobody told them to. They read the ideological environment and drew their own conclusions about what the leader would want. Bin Laden's Al-Qaeda worked the same way after 9/11. He was stuck in a compound in Pakistan communicating by courier. He couldn't direct operations. He didn't need to. The theological infrastructure he'd built produced people who already knew what to do. All he had to do was to push them in the right direction every now and then. January 6th is that dynamic on American soil. The New Apostolic Reformation leaders' tailored documents didn't storm the Capitol themselves. They built the theology. They told millions of Christians they were in a spiritual war. They said the election was stolen by demonic forces. They framed Trump as God's anointed. Then they prayed while other people drew the conclusions and acted on them. The leadership builds the ideology, the followers do the rest. This is Johnny Enlow talking about Donald Trump from a prophetic perspective. He says God gave him a message about Donald Trump.
And he's on a motorcycle. And so I was like, Lord, as I'm saying that, the first thing he said is, he is going to save you from things you don't know you need to be saved from yet. And then the Lord progressively began to speak regarding that. And he said, this time in the presidency is going to be a hinge of the ages. And you be known as before Trump and after Trump because of the way I'm going to use him. I'm using him as a Trump card, but I'm the Trump card player. And so your nation will be known as before Trump and after Trump. And he said the nations will be known as before Trump, after Trump. And the Lord, it was like, I'm really not interested in your all's vote this time. I'm doing it. I usually give you all that option. This time I'm not. This is a rescue operation from heaven. This is a moment of the ages. This will go down. This time period will go down as a before and after AD, but BC, AD, depending on what terminology you use now.
The defense is always going to be, we're not terrorists. But they are, and they know it. They want the general public to be terroristic. This is a real image from a real CPAC event. We are all domestic terrorists. You can look at this and say they were being facetious, but they operate in an identical way to Al-Qaeda. Seriously, I'm not overstating this. They are structurally identical to Al-Qaeda. Why would they put this banner up if not to shift people's mindsets? The Heritage Foundation doesn't plant bombs. The Federalist Society doesn't run soldier training camps. They don't need to. Lone wolves do this for them. And when they hit a wall they can't get past, they still use violence. They still call for Democrats to be hung for treason. They still have their radical little nutcases calling bomb threats to children's hospitals. Violence is still a part of the architecture. It's just not the main load-bearing wall anymore. Al-Qaeda wanted a caliphate. Christian nationalist movements want religious governance. They got the Supreme Court. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. Do you guys remember this video from Nick Fuentes a while back? Where he says, "Your body, my choice"? New camera footage dropped from his court hearing, I believe, that I want to show you guys. Let me catch you up on the story. After Trump won, this happened.
Feel when we control your bodies? Hey, bitch, we control your bodies. Guess what? Guys win again, okay? Men win again. And yes, we control your bodies. Hi, I'm your Republican congressman. Hi, I'm your Republican congressman. It's your body, my choice. And men, women again. Men win again. There will never, ever be a female president. Never. There will never be a female president, ever. It's over. Glass ceiling. Dude, it's a ceiling made of bricks. You will never break it. Your stupid face keeps hitting the brick ceiling. We will keep you down forever. You will never control your own bodies. You will never be the president of the global empire.
So anyway, that's what he said originally, and this went mega viral. People were not happy with him saying this, and it led to him being doxxed. His address was doxxed, and people showed up to his house to film him, to talk shit to him, you know, that kind of thing. And this video went viral at the time afterward.
Hi. Oh my God, what are you doing?
Get out of here.
So we didn't fully understand what happened in that video. It was kind of confusing and a garbled mess, but here's footage from the Ring camera. I believe this came out in his court hearing, like when he was going to criminal court for assaulting this woman because she pressed charges. Here's how it played out.
Hi. Oh my God! What are you doing? Oh.
Get the fuck out of here.
So he pepper sprays her, pushes her to the ground, grabs her phone, walks back inside.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that? I came out with the next car. Did you see where the car was? Next car.
I think she said, did you catch that? And I don't believe that the person watching did, because these seem to be the only like angles that we see it from. There's some other footage of this. This is his original response to it, I believe.
So I am now going viral on TikTok, Twitter, Google search trends for my very funny clip on my election night stream. In a moment of exuberance and jubilation, I excitedly declared that since Donald Trump became the president, women's bodies are now under our control. And I mean that. I said it's their body, but it is our choice. And politically, I'm obsessed with controlling women's bodies. I'm going to tell them what they're allowed to do with them. It's my decision. We as males, we as men control their bodies. They have no say in the matter, and that comes to abortion as well as every other issue. Henceforth, men will be controlling what you eat, what you wear, whether you can have an abortion, what your hair looks like, when and whether you can cut your hair.
He's being flippant, but in all seriousness, this is the type of shit that he actually wants to control. And he recently said in a video that I watched yesterday that he wants actual concentration camps. That is what he said. I want actual concentration camps. And then he says, just joking. You have to publish this part. It's just a joke or I'll sue you for libel. He is the biggest piece of shit on planet Earth, dude. Seriously.
We'll be controlling how much makeup you wear, what you do with your nails. We'll be controlling who you have sex with. We'll be controlling where you live and where you go, what time you go to bed. We're going to be controlling all of that. And this is subject to the law according to Project 2025.
That's actually true. That is actually true. Check this one out. This is, I think, him in an alley after he had been arrested and somebody filming and asking him a question.
What is that about?
I posted a joke on the internet. I'm a live streamer.
You're like a YouTube
This is the police interview after he was arrested. That's what it is.
channel? Or
East
something?
Yeah.
You're saying you're a white supremacist?
I'm not white supremacist. I'm Mexican. I'm also fuentes.
I know, I kind of
white supremacist.
I saw that.
He is a white supremacist, actually. I don't know why he's even pretending otherwise. Absolutely wild. No, I think this is at his house, between his house and the house next to him. Here, this is a good example of who he is, if you're unfamiliar.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
This should show exactly who he is. He's a piece of shit. A vile piece of shit. So it comes as no surprise that people would not like him. The people would go to his house and harass him. I'm not endorsing that. We shouldn't be doing things like that. I don't want to live in a world where it's acceptable to do that type of thing, where political violence or intimidation is accepted as, political speech or whatever. I don't want to live in that world. But the point is, he kind of had that coming, and it's absolutely no surprise to anybody that this played out the way that it did. That's the bottom line. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. He's just a disgusting sack of garbage, truthfully. Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if... We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. This is spirit science. So vegans leave the angriest comments. What's this?
Okay, this is a bit of a strange thing to me, but I feel like I want to make a video about it because it has been true in my experience for a really long time. Generally speaking, vegans are the most angry people in the comments on my videos that I have ever seen. And of course, they only really come out when I make a video that talks about food that doesn't specifically say everyone should be vegan. Now, personally, I don't think that humanity is at a point to being able to completely let go of eating animal products. And I don't think that that's necessarily even the best way to go. I've personally tried being vegan before, and at first, for the first like 4 months, it was amazing. I really cleaned up my body. I felt a lot of healing. I felt really good. But after a while, I found that I was eating so much and was consistently unsatiated. And I would even be supplementing with all kinds of different like protein powders and different kinds of things. And it still was having I was having this effect of being really imbalanced in my body. And like,
by the way, this is a cult leader. His name is Jordan. This is the thumbnail right here, right? He's the cult leader of Spirit Science, this YouTube channel with like millions of followers on it. It was insane. So anyway, he's talking about veganism, huh?
Always hungry, but then always eating and not feeling all right. This was back in like 2017, 2018. I ended up having a piece of chicken at my parents' place. And
shame.
And it immediately satisfied the craving that my body was seeking, and I was like, okay.
We are omnivores, and I don't think that humans are like. I don't think veganism is healthy for you, unless you're supplementing with extra things like like protein powders and omega-3 and stuff like that. But being fully vegan, zero animal products at all, I think that's dangerous. With no supplementing or anything, I don't think that's healthy. I'm willing to be corrected on that, but yeah. Last time I talked about this, I got hit pretty hard. Last time I talked about it was with Cosmic Skeptic. I talked to him about it, and then he just completely turned on me and tried to destroy me. Basically, we haven't spoken since. And then he stopped being vegan after that. So anyway.
Okay, well then maybe I should be an omnivore. I went like that for another year or so. And then I started to do research as I was starting Spirit Mysteries, the original version of the Spirit Science Mystery School. And I started learning about how all of these ancient mystic teachings all said pretty much the same thing, from like the ancient Egyptian and Greek mystery schools to the mystics of India and all of the lineages that have come out of there. They all said a vegetarian diet for a spiritual person is the way to go. And so when we launched Spirit Mysteries, I actually did a class about
vegetarian and vegan are different, of course.
This, and I made this commitment that I was going to practice being vegetarian. And from that point, I've pretty much not gone back. There have been a few times where I've made exceptions and I've tried some meat here and there, and sometimes it was okay and sometimes it wasn't. And the quality is such a big thing. And I would never try and really get down on myself about it, because life is this very interesting mix of experience, and it's really important not to get so attached and caught up on the small details as we're figuring ourselves out in the journey that we're going through.
Well, I think the argument is that like animals are going through their own journey and you're ending their journey prematurely by eating them, right? So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm not vegan. I don't think it's a moral necessity to be vegan. I think you can be moral and not vegan is the ultimate point here. But yeah, I think you're completely missing the point.
We also need to experiment with ourselves to find out what makes sense for us, what's the best path, what way we should be eating and living and practicing and treating others, the words that we use, everything. We're in a constant state of refining ourselves and breaking ourselves down at the same time. And so this was really interesting to me because then, we did this movie once called Healing with Food, the movie, and it was more of a pro-vegan side of things. This was when I was really looking at a lot of the research that overeating a lot of animal products and especially processed sugar and other processed foods were causing a lot of issues in the collective human body of consciousness.
The collective human body of consciousness. That is a lot of words.
A lot of sicknesses and diseases that we have today come from breaking the laws of harmony.
This painfully stupid motivational music in the background, though, right? Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too.
Especially as it relates to food. It also relates to our broken belief systems or disconnection from the soul or following spiritual paths that are ultimately superficial. All of these things trickle down into the way that we live our lives physically.
Did you just say trickle down?
But yet, ever since that movie was made, you know, again, I've gone through my own journey of exploring and discussing with myself and others and then making videos about different ways of eating. Is it right to eat meat or vegetarian or vegan, or should we be eating fish? Probably not. They're all poisoned. But whenever I do talk about anything that...
They're all poisoned? Fish are all poisoned? Okay.
...is food related, I often find that vegans are the most angry and they are really mad. Like even when I did the video talking about what's going on with Israel and Palestine,
Boy, that sounds like an interesting video. I should watch that. We should watch that in a minute.
You know, definitely generated some frustration, but nothing in comparison to like when we talked about being vegetarian. And I have just been shocked by this, because one might think or presume that one who's following a vegan path is much more earth-centered and connected to the planet and connected to their own spiritual practices. And in that, maybe having a sense of understanding and compassion for other people and where they're at. And I know that this isn't a general statement. I can't say all vegans are really angry. That's not what I'm trying to say here.
It sounds like what you're trying to say. Like, why are you dancing around it? Just tell us that you don't like vegans. Damn.
But it's so interesting to me that there's such a level of sensitivity there. Now, of course, I have to acknowledge, and we all have to see that there's a very good reason for that frustration. And I'm not trying to say that this is not a big issue.
Bro, it sounds like he's just dancing around. Just fucking come out and say what you want to say. Jesus Christ.
Vegans are predominantly angry because there is this huge mistreatment of animals across the board, whether it's in the factory farms that are like the slaughterhouses and the raising of those animals, or the treatment of dairy cows and the treatment of chickens and all of it. It's terrible. It's terrifying. It's a literal modern day Holocaust that is taking place.
Oh my God, dude. So are you vegan or not?
These animals that is not being addressed. And I know that is a very sharp thing to say, but there's truth in it, because if you treated humans that way, we would say this is akin to Nazi Germany.
Yeah, you're right. Look, I don't want to get tied up in the vegan argument, because it genuinely, like, if you care about things, then I'm happy. You know, I care that you care about making the world better, period. But Nazi Germany, they were killing Jews because they just hated Jews and they wanted them dead, and that was the bottom line. There was no like purpose or logical reason or anything behind it. That's different from why farms exist. Farms exist to feed human beings. There is a purpose to it for us. And it's literally not possible for humans to survive, for the human race to survive without animal meat. Individuals can. It's not healthy, but the human race cannot. For better or worse, that's a necessary part of human beings existing, eating animal meat. I don't like it any more than you, but that's what it is.
Something needs to be done. And I'm with everybody out there who expresses frustration towards the factory farming or animal farming systems. This needs to change. At the same time, I believe there is a healthy and harmonious middle
Like,
ground.
look at these weird arm things he's wearing too, by the way. What the fuck are these weird arm things? What is this? Why is he wearing this?
At least in my experience, and I think where humanity is right now, because we are still moving from a state of very dense matter-based consciousness into a more energetic reality, and we are just at the beginning of a very long cycle. You know, this whole movement of the age of Aquarius, we're barely scratching the surface on
Age of Aquarius, okay.
entering the age of Aquarius, and this is going to go for 2,000 years. There's a lot of changes that are coming, and we are laying a foundation right now through the internet technology that we've developed.
The internet technology. All right, cool.
Raise awareness and global consciousness about harmonious ways of living and how to be in alignment with nature, ourselves, and God. And of course, nature, ourselves, all a part of God, God being the everything and all that is, and the Supreme Spirit, the unified field from which everything arises.
Is that what God is?
So, with that said, I would like to see massive change happening. But in the meantime, my recommendation for anyone, no matter how you're eating, one is do your research on where your food comes from. I seriously do not recommend eating fish or pork. There's very good reasons for it, and if you want to learn why, please watch the shorts. Actually, I'll link them right here or here. I don't know how the video is going to show up. But in addition to that, really find out where your food is coming from. Do not buy general mainstream meat or eggs or dairy.
I agree that some of the way that factory farms are run is fucking evil and should be done away with. 100%, absolutely. I don't think that equates to, or I don't think that then justifies not eating meat at all. It's very unhealthy for a human body to not eat meat at all. I don't think that's good. Or to eat meat products.
Get it from a local source at the highest quality that you can. You will feel better in your body if you clean up the food that you're eating. Also, if you want to go further on healing your body, please download the 10 steps to healing your body and mind workbook and worksheet that I just created. You can find a link in the description. We have a download on our new website, Spirit Science.
Okay, now he's advertising. Anyway, the point is that that's really interesting that he's like kind of at least a little bit leaning toward veganism to some degree. I'm not disagreeing with you, Owen. However, it's curious that the universe we find ourselves in requires suffering/pain to continue on the top of the food chain. I'm not sure what specifically you're implying with that, but that's just the natural way of how things survive, right? Like that's how things have always worked evolutionarily. It's just the nature of reality, for better or worse, I think. So, yeah. Yeah, tell me what you think in the comments. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. This is Pastor Robert Jeffress. He's a televangelist and a Trump loyalist. Fascinatingly, he actually turned on Donald Trump during 2020 and in 2024 before he was the candidate. He said, we don't want Donald Trump as the candidate. He was lobbying for other candidates in the Republican Party. But when Trump won, he supported him again because he has no backbone. Listen to what he said.
Your take here. The Vatican put out a statement and they said that there was an exchange of views. We don't know what exactly that means, but they exchanged some views.
You don't know what that means? It means there was an argument between Trump and the Pope, obviously.
Give me your take about this public criticism from really both sides.
Yeah, both sides to blame. Donald Trump goes after the Pope. Yeah, and both sides are to blame for that. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Look, I think it's commendable that the Trump administration is meeting with the Pope and trying to work with the Pope. The Pope is a good man. He's sincere in his faith, but he is sincerely wrong when it comes to Iran. The Pope ought to know, and I think he does know, God created both the church and government for two distinct purposes. The role of the church is to point people to faith in Jesus Christ, but the role of government is to protect citizens from evildoers, according to Romans 13. And
okay.
Look, 3 days after this conflict began, I was in the Oval Office with President Trump and a few other faith leaders, and he told us that Iran was within weeks of getting a powerful weapon that would destroy Israel.
Well, he lied, obviously. That wasn't true, as we know. Donald Trump bombed nuclear bunkers or whatever, and said he set them back a year at least. And now he's saying that they were like weeks away again? So is he lying then or is he lying now? Obviously, he was lying both times. I cannot believe that these people fall for this garbage. You know, this is one of those people who I don't even believe, or who I don't even think believes the shit that he spreads.
Much of the Middle East and could bring great harm to America, and he had no choice but to act. And I thanked him then for having the courage to fulfill his God-given responsibility to protect our nation. And you know, the great irony is it looks like President Trump has a better understanding of what the Bible teaches about the role of government than the Pope has. And I'm glad the president hasn't backed down at all.
Okay. Brother, what? Trump has a better understanding of the Bible than the Pope? Do you know what's involved in becoming Pope? Do you know, I didn't know this. Did you know that religion or priests or whatever is a full scholarly discipline, and you write actual scholarly articles on religious subjects, like the concept of cheap grace, for example? You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer from World War II wrote about this. Cheap grace versus costly grace. People will do cheap things, cheap, easy things. They'll repeat platitudes. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Repeating that over the place is empty and vapid and cheap and pointless and meaningless. It doesn't mean something unless it costs you something. You know, like the woman who gave her last dollar that Jesus was watching, like she donated it, and Jesus said that cost her more than anything that anybody else here is putting into this. It cost her more, and that means that it means more. That's costly grace. So that's an example of a scholarly kind of concept that priests or religious scholars will submit to scholarly academic, papers, like theological papers or whatever. The Pope has so much experience writing scholarly articles on theological subjects. He probably knows the Bible maybe better than anybody on planet Earth. You may not agree with his interpretation of it or whatever, but he knows what he is doing when it comes to the Bible. And to say that this guy, who doesn't even know what his favorite Bible verse is, because he doesn't have one, knows more about the Bible than the Pope.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into.
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite.
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse.
No.
Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too. The Bible says you have to be ready to give an accounting of your own faith if asked. He's violating the Bible right now by not telling us what his favorite verse is.
I don't want to do that.
Are you an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible, the whole Bible is an incredible. I joke
Very.
Are you getting me? You like the Old Testament and the New Testament equally? That question was designed to figure out what kind of a Christian you are. And you just made it very clear to us that you simply aren't a Christian, right? Yeah, Donald Trump knows more about it than the Pope. Totally. That checks out. Anyway, Robert Jeffress, like, I haven't covered him in a long, long time, but since he's making another appearance, I think he used to go on Lou Dobbs or something, and Lou Dobbs was the patsy who was blamed on Fox News for all of the COVID disinformation they were spreading, and he was fired for it, even though it was obviously like everybody on Fox News spreading that shit. So Jeffress doesn't really come on Fox News as much anymore since he, his main man lost his show, but he made another appearance, so it's worth talking about him again. Listen to this. This one is from 2020, June 2020, before Donald Trump, or before the election took place, I believe. Listen to this one.
Here's the question. There are those that would say that the separation clause of the Constitution would mandate that all public discourse be totally secular.
What? There are those who would say that you can't talk about God publicly? What the fuck are you talking about? Who says this? This is complete and total delusion, right?
Do you believe that the separation clause mandates secular discourse?
Well, first of all, there is no separation clause. It doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution.
That's not right. It's the first sentence of the First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or whatever it is. I think that was pretty close. It doesn't say separation of church and state, probably is what you meant to say. In the same way that the Constitution doesn't say gun rights. Gun rights aren't in the Constitution. The Second Amendment pertains to gun rights, but gun rights aren't in the Constitution, just like the separation of church and state isn't in the Constitution. But the First fucking Amendment talks about it.
There's no such thing as a separation of church and state in the Constitution. What the First Amendment says is Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Right. So it does talk about that, then, is what you're saying.
Our forefathers came from another country where there was a state-imposed church, where people were forced to worship. They wanted no part of that. They said, we're not going to allow government to establish a state church and coerce people to worship in it. That's all it says. It has nothing to say about Ten Commandment displays in schools.
Well, see, therein lies the problem. If you allow Ten Commandments displays in schools, you are favoring one religion over another. See how that works? You're not supposed to favor one religion over another. If you have 10 Commandments statues in schools, then you have to allow like parts of the Quran to be displayed in schools. Or you're favoring one religion over another. Obviously. This is the dirtiest fucking play I hear from these scumbags.
Nativity scenes in the public squares are prayers at the graduation. In 1980, the Supreme Court in Stone versus Graham said, you can no longer display the Ten Commandments in a Kentucky school. Can't even display them, much less teach them.
That's because it would be favoring one religion over another, yes, which is explicitly what the First Amendment has been interpreted to mean, all the way back to the 1800s in the founding of the country, yes.
What's interesting, Clark, is 118 years before that, a similar case came before the Supreme Court of whether the Bible could be read in school. And the Supreme Court said unanimously, and I'm quoting, why may not the Bible, especially the New Testament, be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament? Now that was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier. And every time I'm on Fox debating some of these pinheads from the ACLU, I ask them the question. I say, now tell me, why is it in the mid-1800s you could read and teach the New Testament, but suddenly the Supreme Court decides 118 years later that you can't even post the Ten Commandments? What changed? Did the Constitution change and nobody told us about it? Of course not. The Constitution hasn't changed, but what has changed is this. We have allowed the atheists, the secularists, the humanists to hijack our Constitution and pervert it into something our forefathers never intended. That's what the problem is.
Okay, let's just break this down. He said the 1844 Supreme Court case, it's Vidal v. Girard's executors, I believe, proves the Bible was meant to be taught in schools. That's his claim. That case was about whether a private will that excluded clergy from a school was valid. It was a property dispute, not a ruling that public schools must teach the Bible. Justice Story's comments about the Bible were dicta, non-binding commentary. So he found some random case that had absolutely nothing to do with anything and found this judge who was commenting on this case who agreed with him, basically. He found a judge in the United States who agreed with him. But this was not established in the legal framework of the case. The context was that Judge Story was saying the school in question could still teach morality from the Bible even without clergy present. He was upholding the will, not mandating the Bible instruction in public schools. Either way, that's not what the founding fathers wanted. That's not how our country has ever operated, and that's not how it should operate. Regarding his claim, what changed? The Constitution didn't change. Yes, it has actually changed a lot. The 14th Amendment, 1868, fundamentally transformed constitutional law by applying the Bill of Rights to state governments through the incorporation doctrine. Before that, the First Amendment only restricted Congress. States could and did have established churches into the 1830s. Massachusetts had an official state church until 1833, so this is completely made up. Yes, the Constitution did change. Stone v. Graham, 1980, judicial overreach by secularists who hijacked the Constitution, he mentioned there. Stone v. Graham held that posting the Ten Commandments in public school classrooms violated the Establishment Clause because it had no secular legislative purpose. This is called the Lemon Test. And they actually, right-wing extremists, erased what the Lemon Test is what it was called. They erased the Lemon Test not too long ago. The Lemon Test was basically this thing that required that whatever law you pass must have some secular purpose. It must somehow benefit not just specific religious people. It must have some reach beyond that. Now, if religious people are being persecuted and you pass a law to prevent that, that goes beyond just those religious people, right? That's a protection for a minority group, for example. So it's not just about not having a bill about religious people. The court applied the Lemon Test from Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971. You can disagree with the Lemon Test, but calling it a hijacking ignores that the court was applying a consistent analytical framework. He was completely full of shit. I mean, he's framing the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, literally the first sentence of the First Amendment of the Constitution, as a secular or an atheistic takeover of the United States. It's delusion. But that's Robert Jeffress. That's who he is. That's what he's about. Listen to this one. This one is from 2019. This is before the election where Trump lost. And he had some predictions for what's going to happen if Trump loses.
It's very clear to me that the average American citizen loves this president, and they're not buying into all of this impeachment nonsense.
There is a
No, this is under impeachment. I'm sorry. I thought this was during the election.
fear that if the left ever regains control of this country again, our nation is finished.
Well, look at that, huh? Weird. The nation wasn't finished after the left took control again. Is that weird to anybody else? Almost like he was completely full of shit. Almost like he was lying out his ass. Huh? How about that?
And look, I said this on Fox and Friends yesterday, and the president retweeted my comments last night.
Wow, look at you. Not to toot your own horn or anything. Toot, toot, baby.
Look, the Democrats knew they couldn't beat him at the ballot box in 2016. They are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that they can't beat him in 2020 either.
Whoopsie daisy. Yeah, just picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies on that one, didn't we?
Impeachment is the only option they have to remove Donald J. Trump from office. And look, I heard this sanctimonious Nancy Pelosi this weekend calling for prayer for our country and praying for prayer. Look.
Praying for prayer. Okay. Well, Donald Trump has legitimately destroyed this country. So, yeah, I would say that it's totally fair for religious people to ask for prayer for our country because of how much damage Donald Trump has done to it. That checks out.
That reminds me of an arsonist, a pyromaniac with a match in his hand about to set a building on fire saying, now pray with me that the destruction I'm about to cause isn't too severe.
What? What did Nancy Pelosi do to destroy the country exactly, precisely?
I mean, if he's sincere, he'll put down the dang match. And if Nancy Pelosi is sincere about bringing this nation together, she will drop this impeachment effort. Let the American people decide 1 year from now at the ballot box.
Well, they did. And they didn't decide the way Robert Jeffress expected, I suppose. Like I said, he actually was opposed to Donald Trump in the primaries each time. But when he went up for election in the general, he supported him every single time. He's a weasel, is the point here. Robert Jeffress is a weasel. Always has been, always will be. It's entertaining as hell to circle back around and see what he's up to every now and then. Tell me what you think in the comments. That's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, don't forget to check me out on Patreon. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.